SABC News celebrates Women's Month.
All right, this Women's Day, we're looking at the fact that women are often held back right from the beginning, from the starting blocks. We're talking about the education of young girls and asking what is government's role in levelling the playing field at schools. To discuss tonight, we're joined by diversity trainer and political analyst Asanda Ngoasheng. We're also joined by the Deputy Secretary General of Equal Education, Tracey Malawana. Thank you both for being with me tonight. Ms. Malawana is with us on the telephone. Let me start with you, Ms. Ngoasheng. We know that there is this huge inequality in South Africa, the divide, often black and white or rich and poor. How big are the barriers when we look at girls in education as opposed to boys?
Well, I think that we need to take it all the way back from the beginning. And that is to say that in South Africa, where you are born really has an impact on where you are likely to end up in society. And so we know from situations like there was a Khayelitsha Police Commission, which showed that children literally in the womb were being affected by the violence in the environment that they were growing up in, and that already had an impact. It had an impact on them compared to children who were growing up in less violent communities. And so, if you're looking at what is the difference between the poor and the rich, already in the womb, those changes are taking place and the inequality is there. And then you get to access to education. And if you look at the number of ECDs, if you look at the quality of ECDs, and if you look at the level of education of the ECD teachers that are available in poor communities, you'll understand that while people are doing a lot with very little and are making the best of the means that they have, there is a big sense of inequality in the level of education that poor children are able to get, and particularly girls, because our society and our communities still value the education of boys more than they value the education of girls. And so if somebody has to be held back, whether it's because of money, lack of money, or whatever issues there are in the family, it's going to be the girl. If somebody needs to be taken care of, once the girl becomes a teenager, if a relative gets sick, it's the girl who's the one that is expected to take care of that relative, and the boy is able to continue going to school. If you look at when it comes to issues of teens having children, it is the girl who's expected to take time out of her schooling while the boy child is able to continue. And even though when we look at the statistics when it comes to universities, it seems that there are more women entering the university space than there are men. When we look at the workplace, women are still being discriminated against. There are still more men in the workplace. There are still more men managers. And so women's discrimination starts from the womb all the way to the workplace. And this is not by coincidence. It is because we live in a patriarchal society, and we live in a society that actively discriminates against women from as young as birth.
Yeah, and you've outlined that journey, divergent journey. Ms. Malawana, tell us your own experience. And I think one thing you're really passionate about is sanitation. And you grew up and you attended public schools, sometimes without running water, without functioning toilets. How does that affect a little girl?
Thank you for having me. Good evening to the viewers at home. So I grew up in Tembisa. I'm currently located. Sorry, I couldn't join via Zoom. But to just speak a little bit, I fully agree with Asanda, what she said around the fact that we grew up in, patriarchal society. And they normally say that the school that a school is a reflection of a particular community. So if a school does not have water, the chances of, that community not to have water are very high. So, as a girl child, to just build up on what Asanda said, is that when the COVID-19 started, we conducted a survey to get a sense of where our equalizer school-going members are at. So we asked them how's learning under COVID-19, And some of them would raise challenges around the fact that before they even, focus on their schoolwork, they need to make sure that they prepare for their younger, brothers. They need to make sure that everyone has been fed. They need to make sure that everyone knows what they need to do within the day before they even focus on themselves. Then sometimes in a normal day, girls will be expected to wake up early and prepare for everyone because of, how we grew up in especially in black communities, where, as a girl, you need to look after everyone. So you wake up at 5, you prepare for everyone, you need to walk to school. So access to school or education is quite difficult. And when you get there, you also need to, use this, the toilets that is inadequate. And when you access that toilet, if it's not safe enough for you, then you are likely not to come to school. Sometimes you are at school, you have maybe period pains, or you are on your periods, you don't have access to menstrual hygiene products. So I think those are some of the issues that, girls are faced with. Yeah. And access to education on its own is quite difficult because of some of the issues that, that girls come with, especially when it comes to the things that I've noted, but also what Asanda said around, our responsibilities and the fact that if you are pregnant, sometimes you are likely to be discriminated than a boy you have impregnated you in the same school. So I think those are some of the challenges that young girls are faced with in schools.
And Ms. Malawana, if we focus on the sanitation, so you've brought up, young girls are receiving sanitary pads, but you need proper sanitation, otherwise you're vulnerable to infections, things like that. And there's a link, is there not, even to gender-based violence there?
Yeah, so that is very true. So Equal Education has been campaigning for adequate, dignified sanitation, especially in rural provinces. So if, as I've mentioned before, if you don't have access to adequate, dignified sanitation, you are likely to use maybe the bushes to relieve yourself. And most of the time that, I think, expose you to, the issues of rape or being harassed. And also like being bullied because you just came from, the bush to relieve yourself. And most of the time as a girl child, as, our equalizers would normally say, that the easy way is not to go to school if you have a running tummy, not to go to school if you are on your period because you can't access, a toilet, you can't wash your hands. You don't even have menstrual hygiene products, a sanitary pad or a tampon. So those are, some of the key issues that girls are faced with when it comes to sanitation. Hence, at Equal Education, we've been, doing our best every year to try and make sure that girl learners have access to dignified and safe sanitation.
So, Ms. Ngoasheng, this also links to what you were saying, that generally girls are disadvantaged because of gender-based violence in their communities. Then they go to schools and sometimes there's violence there, and now there's this extra vulnerability because they don't have safe places to go and use a toilet.
Yeah, I think that we have an issue in society where women's lives are not valued in the same way that men's lives or boys' lives are valued. And as a result, the hurt, the harm, the trauma that women come to is not seen in the same light. And that's why there's talk particularly around Women's Day of women being imbokodo, because women go through so much. And because of this idea and belief that women, are rocks, there's a sense of belief that we are able to endure a lot more than we actually are able to. And nobody talks about the mental health burden that women find themselves really struggling to carry because they are facing gender-based violence, because they are victims of sexual harassment in the workplace, in the school place, and everywhere they go. And I think you can imagine as any human being, if you live a life where you are literally permanently feeling like you are persecuted, feeling permanently under attack, feeling permanently like somebody could grab you, could rape you, could kidnap you, and do a myriad of many other things that happens to girls and women in this country, there's a deep psychological impact to that. And we do not cater for it in any way in this country. We do not have any systems in place to make sure that women get the kind of help that they need, so that when they are victims of GBV, they actually are in a position to access counseling, to access trauma counseling, particularly because the situations are traumatizing, and particularly when they get compounded with living in a poverty-stricken environment, living in a generally violent society.
Yes, so thank you. We're running out of time, so I have to ask you, what is government's role here? I mean, is there any excuse for the simple issue of not having functioning toilets, running water? And let me try and pose this to you both towards the end. What is government's role, particularly education, of course?
I think that government has a responsibility to ensure that all children in South Africa have access to education and an educational environment that is conducive to their learning. But in particular, they have a responsibility to ensure the safety of girls in school, because girls are still finding themselves being victims of predatory teachers. They're finding themselves being victims of even predatory colleagues or other learners who rape them, who do all kinds of things to them. And then secondly, when it comes to sanitation, our government has a responsibility to ensure that all young children, all children at schools, but in particular girls, because it affects them more adversely than boys, because this is a safety issue, of course, as has been explained, as well as a hygiene issue.
Yes. So, Ms. Malawana, throw in your last comment there, and I also think you've called for a change in curriculum to look at social justice issues and things like that, which I guess would benefit little girls and little boys.
Yeah, so I fully agree with you, Asanda, that the access to education is a basic human right. So it's very important for government to ensure that all learners, especially girls, have access to, quality education, equal and quality education. And that comes with ensuring that there's, dignified sanitation, there's, proper classes, there's fencing parameters, all the things that are captured within the norms and standards for school infrastructure, a law that states what makes a school to be a school. So I'd say that the government has an obligation to ensure that these things are there in schools. They have an obligation to be accountable to young people in this country, to be transparent about, some of the obstacles that they are facing in terms of implementing or putting in place these things. And they also need to make sure that they do right by learners, especially girls in this country, because they have an obligation to do that. So I'll stop there, but I'd also like to maybe I can come back and speak more about what needs to be done around curriculum, educating both girls and boys around, issues of menstrual hygiene, but also safety in general, especially with GBV, the rate of GBV in our country.
Yes, we'd appreciate that. And thank you to you both for this discussion tonight. Diversity trainer and political analyst Asanda Ngoasheng, and also the Deputy Secretary General of Equal Education, Tracey Malawana.